Hello, denizens of the internet. Networked screenwriter reaction here. And yes, I am going to tear into She-Hulk and the Rings of Power, but only to use them as very good, bad examples. So let's dive right in. Everything that's aired on Disney Plus, with the exception of the single episode of Werewolf by Night, has been garbage. This proves that the House of Mouse can create good shows, but for some reason, in the case of She-Hulk, a much beloved comic character with a lot of wit by John Byrne, if you ask me, it should be called John Byrne's She-Hulk, save for the fact that they didn't follow the comics, and the entire show was literally a fuck you to fans. They built She-Hulk, attorney at law, for no one. They had a really great time in the writer's room deciding to create not just subpar material, but it was designed to piss Marvel fans off. The finale was, so I hear, I've never actually watched a single episode, and from the sound of it, I'm lucky I chose not to, completely designed to piss off true fans and turn them into misogynists, and they trolled us in advance because they decided to make a shit show instead of something good. How long can a for-profit outfit like Disney keep putting out garbage and expect people to still pay for it? Don't they have a board of directors and a group of stake or stockholders that should be very angry at what's happened to the stock price? It's way down from almost $200 a share to around $118 a share. It's lost 50% of its value, and investors that put in $1 and come out with 50 cents aren't going to be sold a bill of goods over and over again. Until they clean house of Kathleen Kennedy and her Star Wars story group at Lucasfilm, controlling everything by modern woke identity politics, and in this case, third wave feminist intersectionalism, and get in people that understand storytelling, screenwriting, why people watch, listen to, and read stories, and the correct way to tell stories. The 3-act format of a screenplay, where between Act 1 and Act 2, you have Turning Point 1, which drives the action into the second act, and between Act 2 and Act 3, Turning Point 2, which drives the action into the third act, and that drives the action, moving the story where you have the resolution of two arcs, the story arc and the character arc, say a redemption arc or a conflict in the story or between characters that is resolved in the third act. An epiphany, an anticlimax, a climax, and hopefully a nice twist ending that goes differently than what you expected, but hopefully not jumping the shark or it was all a dream or anything like that. People have been writing stories and stage plays and screen and teleplays for over 70 years now, and just about every film violates some version of storytelling. One, never put emphasis on something that you aren't going to pay off because the audience will expect that payoff. I found recently, after watching an otherwise good film with a screenwriter friend, that something at the beginning of the film never got paid off, which is a violation of Chekhov's gun, a screenwriting rule that means if there's a gun on the mantelpiece in the first act, it must be fired by the third act. And when I mentioned it to my friend, he was like, oh yeah, that's right. And two, no one ever sets out to write a bad show or a bad episode, and yet it's all around us and almost all that's on television, movies, and streaming. Very few working writers in Hollywood seem to know how to tell a good story. So, Achtung, young writers. There are a ton of very good screenwriting books. If you can't afford to go to a writer's workshop, pick any book by Sid Field, the grandfather of teaching screenwriting, and it will open you up creatively, even if you're just starting out and have little to no experience. Because without cracking open some of these books, and having little to no experience, you're going to write shit for the rest of your life. So do yourselves a favor, you cocky, self-centered, arrogant little worms, and read a screenwriting book or two. Learn your craft. It's actually pretty simple. And these aren't all of Sid Field's books. There are more, but these are the ones that I started out with. For instance, how to pitch, sell, and market your screenplay. Selling a screenplay. This is obviously after you've read some of the early ones, including 4 screenplays, Thelma and Louise, Terminator 2, The Silence of the Lambs, and Dances with Wolves, because, I mean, those are excellent films and excellent screenplays. I teach short story writing using the 3-act play structure and even novels because it's such a solid way to tell stories. Once you get into the swing of it, if you write every day, have character and story arcs that make sense, you're golden. I don't know why J.J. Abrams got to give a TED Talk on mystery box writing, but look at him now. Every single project he tries to get greenlit either doesn't or dies unceremoniously on the chopping block. These corporations that are filled, at least on the creative side, with these absolute shit for brains, no experienced dingbat writers, directors, and the people to whom they report all need to be axed, or they need to take time during the hiatus to read some fucking screenplay books or take classes. Since they're in Hollywood and they're working screenwriters, you'd think they have to be able to afford a screenwriter's workshop. But if they can't or you can't, Mr. Sci-Fi, Mark Scott Zicree and his wife Elaine donate their time for free when at a certain time a bunch of would-be creatives call them up live on a YouTube stream and ask them for their sage advice, which they freely give once a week to prospective producers, writers, screenwriters, and on up the food chain. And the short story of how to pitch and sell screenplays are questions that they get from becoming the showrunners of their own show, all for free. So to learn the proper methods and procedures, which really aren't very hard once you learn what you're doing, make a plan, follow the plan, and change that plan if it doesn't work out. There are many stumbling blocks to go from writing a great screenplay and turning it into a hit series or movie. But if you start out not knowing what you're doing, you'll never get past that point. You still have to pitch that great screenplay, so you'll have to learn how to pitch, even an elevator pitch, because 30 seconds may be all you have to impress upon your mark the quality of the screenplay and your quality as a writer. It's actually mostly who you know and being at the right place at the right time. Just dumb luck. But without a good start, learning screenwriting, you'll never get to step 2 unless you know the right people at the right place. You may have to write and direct your own micro-budget films to impress the right people that you need to be taken out of obscurity and placed where you belong, as the showrunner, or at least in a writer's room. Not long ago, most screenplays were written by a single person and maybe punched up by a script doctor or maybe given notes by the studio. Unfortunately, even writing is a team sport. You'll have to go through editors, producers, directors, even a few powerful actors, as well as some other writers who all want a chunk of what you've got, because success can be smelled a mile away, and garbage, well, it usually goes into the round file. Except these days, when crap writers keep getting greenlit season after season of absolute crap, at some point people are going to look up from their phones, tablets, and TVs and think, why is everything I see absolute shit? Then they'll need people like Sid Field to come out of retirement, and that will have to be a function across the board. People that have retired from being creatives, cast, crew, or writers, and teach the next generation how it works, because it doesn't seem like film schools teach the tried and true method anymore. So, denizens of the internet, hear my words. Don't just agree and nod along or disagree and forget what I've said equally quickly. If you have the writing itch, scratch it. But make sure that when you do it with the correct techniques and get the job done. Otherwise, you're going to end up like those cocky, self-centered, arrogant little worms that think that they know what they're doing when they don't. It's the Peter principle again, friends. People inevitably get into a position just one level above their station, one level above what they know they can do, one level above their ability. I'd be perfectly happy not ghostwriting, taking writing jobs that I couldn't care less about, being a script doctor, editor, etc., if that's where I belonged. If I made it to just exactly the level of my talent and my knowledge, that would be just fine with me. Showrunner? Head of a writing room? Sure, I can and nearly did do that. Producer? Yeah, I know enough and have been the producer on films enough that I know how that works. Don't get me wrong, knowing the right people and being at the right place at the right time is half the battle. But the first half is knowing why people tell, watch, read, and listen to stories and how to construct good stories, which takes getting up off the couch and going to your computer and writing every day. And the screenwriting books I mentioned before, they'll be your best friends if that's how you have to start out. I was lucky enough to attend a writer's workshop, and after it was over, there was a much smaller local one. And as an editor, I ended up on the other side, teaching people better writing techniques, and giving as good critique as I could. I knew from the writer's workshop that the hardest thing to do is lose one's words. Actually, my mom taught me that, but you never listen to what your mom says. But in writing, add brevity, and brevity is the soul of wit. I knew I shouldn't be defensive when the experts gave me advice that was, lose this, try this, and make sure your characters earn their fate, and things like that. But it was all worth it to become a better writer. Lose those damn words. If you're a good writer, you'll lose lots of words, which is good because those are the words standing in the way between turning a good phrase and making someone want to read the rest of your story from page 1. It's a good deal if in losing your words, it cuts off the chaff and makes your story a compelling read that the reader can't put down, even though they have a doctor's appointment. So, in closing, future good writers and denizens of the internet, take it from me, a networked screenwriter that has several projects in the works. Be your best self. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the best, most knowledgeable screenwriter that you can. And if the course you're on isn't working, change the plan and develop a new course. Keep reinventing yourself and don't let another rejection slip get you down, because that's just one more step closer to a yes. As a matter of fact, I collect rejection slips, but to get one, you have to submit, and that means knowing what you're doing. Unlike the we've never done anything before showrunners for The Rings of Power, and they either haven't read Tolkien, don't care about him, or are just shitty at their jobs. You'd think that there would be somebody at Amazon in between the production staff and the creatives that could say, whoa, Nelly, what the fuck do you think you're doing? But instead, as soon as Christopher Tolkien died, they fired their Tolkien expert and gave Jeff Bezos exactly what he wanted, a Game of Thrones, which was a pretty good show until George R.R. Martin took his hand off the show at the end of the 5th season, and those idiots that had admittedly never read a screenwriting book or taken a class or found a writer's workshop got a hold of it. Dan Benioff, the showrunner himself, called Game of Thrones the most expensive film class in the world. And that's exactly what it was. So don't be like him. He got the job because his dad is a vice president at Goldman Sachs and happened to know the head of HBO. And because George R. R. Martin wanted to know that these yahoos knew his work, he asked Benioff, who is Jon Snow's mother? And he guessed the correct answer, having read the Song of Ice and Fire books. But he should have read screenwriting books, which he didn't do because he was bored by them. So instead, he bought the scripts to his 10 favorite movies and thought that that was good enough. So good, he put paragraphs of what should have been dialogue into the director's notes to be communicated by the actors with a single look. Don't get me started, or I'll be here for twice as long and I'll be half as nice. Now I'm going to go watch some Star Trek.
Right here, Captain. Scotty here, Captain. Enterprise to Mrs. Spock. Red, this is the captain.
And of course, the character that everyone decides to kill over and over, the Enterprise.
This is Captain James Kirk of the USS Enterprise.
Anyway, that's all for now. Be seeing you.